Forward. I was a killing joke. And all those guiding lines kept me down for all those times that falseness cannot win, so let your spirit in freedom sing. Holmes, Head Ritual, The Star 1986. Killing joke. Throughout the duration of their long stance in the dark underlay of marketed music, have never really been given the exposure they truly deserve. As if the forces that lie behind show business were always fully aware of their innate potential and calling to help people awaken, a potential which could easily be seen as a threat to the success of the mind-numbing, quick-selling sleep aid that is thrust upon society in the main. As an avid astral traveler and lifetime apprentice seer, having grown up on brain food from such sorcerous, philosophical abundance as Carlos Castaneda and Rupert Bear, Carl Jung, and the Magic Roundabout, I had always been keen to play my own part in assisting those around me to open their eyes to the reality of the illusion in which we live. An eclectic and widely varied collection of vinyl had always been available for me to listen to, due to a stargazing mother and her many hip friends. I grew up with an assortment of families and single folk, in a housing cooperative, to which interesting and downright special souls were regularly drawn to connect and converse. Throughout my teens I became fascinated with Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street films, using the shout for us to wake up. In my own songs, when Freddy was around it was just too dangerous to stay asleep. Krueger was to help me to realize my lux. Having traveled far and mingled wide, sometimes even amongst fellow jokers, it had seemed to me, all but the few ever notice anything at all. Oh dear, J. Coleman. More recently, however, there has been a massive upsurge of awakened souls, meaning I am no longer one of the few freaks of society who won't keep their feet on the ground long enough to run with the herd. People have finally begun to catch up with us in these rapidly changing times, as we spiral speedily into the Aquarian Age. This means that there is now a much greater power behind the unfolding of a better way of life, and a great new earth. This has been a difficult and taxing process for us to contend with, due to the still enormous amount of unconsciousness, and thousands of years of bad habit forming. Acts 2 verse 17, In the last days, I will pour out my Spirit on everyone, your sons and daughters will proclaim my message. Your young men will see visions, and your old men will have dreams. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my Spirit in those days, and they will proclaim my message. This book is written simply because it asked me to write it, rudely interrupting me from the latest bout of mind-dead slumber in which my creative better half was being denied, whilst the slave in me worked for an insulting wage in a job which, although in many ways rewarding, was draining my life force. I had begun to experience ongoing, debilitating physical illness again. Illness sprung from the imbalance that I myself had created. And then I was saved by the glimpse of an Akashic memory that reminded me I had much more important and soul-fulfilling work to do. Killing joke are worthy of more than a quiet mention on the back of the socially acceptable bands who rip off their riffs, so who else than a big-mouthed truth speaker to share her views and observations about a post-punk industrial rock band who remain superior to most, unknown to many, an inspiration to more, and yet still utterly offensive to some. Having spent 28 years of my life closely watching this fascinating, and almost genre-less band of madcap musicians, I suddenly realized that divine purpose and non-linear timing meant that I had already written this book, in 2012. We were approaching the end of an era, recorded in the Mayan calendar, the natural biorhythms of Mother Earth herself and the apparent alignment of the Sun and Earth with the black hole at the center of our galaxy, the 21st of December, 12. Although NASA had offered, enjoy the solstice, by all means, and don't let the dark rift alignments, solar flares, magnetic field reversals, potential impacts, or alleged Maya end-of-the-world predictions get in the way. I am hopefully keen on seeing that aside obvious major upheaval already underway, we shall avoid overly destructive cataclysm and move forward into a fresh, bright and more conscious, loving way of existence. It seems for this to happen, civilization needs to evolve to a much higher state of awareness, and with gusto. Whilst delving into soul sharing and past life connections, other reasons as to why I had been so strongly drawn to Killing Joke began to emerge, which I will attempt to share amidst this collection of recorded detail. I happily accept any critical sneers, or disapproving doubts. It had been clear very early on that I was not of this world, when God healed a gerbil by my touch and love. You could call this an extended review of a unique band, with a massive cult following, coupled with the real-life soap opera of a jackanapes, the combination of which provide an interesting and unusual story. I am honored to share with you the uniqueness of a band that, in my opinion, had preponderance over the alternative music industry, having survived it for a third of a century without ever selling out to the guiding lines. Apart from a very small number of tracks, I have managed to listen long enough to grow to love everything Killing Joke ever produced. Maybe it was down to a unique mixture of extra special personalities that produced a fiery blend of energy and absolute rawness that just hit the right spot for me and so many others. Alongside the music, there is so much about Killing Joke that I admire, stemming from a deep-rooted, cellular connection I have found ultimately impossible to ignore. Following a visit down memory lane to a local punk festival at the Manchester pub, the Star and Garter, I perceived that punk in the main has barely progressed and sounds pretty much the same as it did back in the late 70s. The youngest band, a trio from Manchester, were admittedly tight and well rehearsed, which is somewhat easier than normal to achieve in a trio. Handsome and very into their art, but also emphatically same old city. 3 other bands proved to be much the same, sounding at best like Crass on a bad day. The only band to play that day, with a sparkling uniqueness, were Government Death Epidemic, consisting of at least 2 Joke fans that I know of. It seems musicians who have been exposed to Killing Joke and grown from their inspiration shine that little bit brighter, with an edge of difference over all else. Killing Joke were ahead of the times in 1979, but it is blatantly apparent after witnessing the poorly attended, nowadays punk scene, they are still ahead of the times, with what they were producing back then. Revisiting their earlier recordings for research purposes reminded me of just how timeless and way ahead of that timeless time they really were. I had never seen or heard anything that quite excited me the way Killing Joke did. I have experienced that most of those who have listened to them, I mean really listened to them, can then go on to find it becomes a little difficult to be overly impressed by much else. I had heard some fantastic musicianship in rock over those recent years, with interesting subject matter and deep-leveled understanding of the psyche. The likes of the Dream Theater, for instance, which I had greatly appreciated, after a long wait for anyone to progress further from the greats of the 70s era. There is obviously some interesting and unique material out there now, and I have friends and acquaintances who revel in trying to impress me with their new finds, which by the 3rd track I most often get bored of, because to me it gets boring. It's too predictable, rarely takes me anywhere I haven't already been, and never takes me to the place of animalistic freedom I am able to visit whilst blasting a KJ track. I guess this is looking to be a pretty biased review, but love them or hate them, The joke are definitely worth taking a closer look at. Every new album seeks out another level, a new dimension for us to unfold, and for the ardent explorer, nothing could be more enticing. I have a keen interest in quantum mechanics and mysticism, spirituality, and its inevitable singular destiny with religion, deity and dark forces, all of which sit comfortably alongside the tones of this coruscating band. Nobody can please everyone all of the time, however, and Killing Joke are not overly suited to the faint-hearted, which means then that they are absolutely and incredibly perfect for the brave. In lieu, my obsessive feelings of needing to do more than just watch and listen to Killing Joke, as any normal fan would, have induced a life of extreme intrigue for me, which has been omniversally exciting, at times gruesomely awful, more often painfully shameful, but every bit a wish-fulfilling treat for a person of such great passion and uniqueness as I. My life was tainted by death and separation from the moment I was born. My father was in hospital losing his battle against hepatitis B, whilst my non-addict, brave, and beautiful mother was giving birth to me on another ward. My father died when I was 12 days old, and as he was an Orthodox Jew who had left the faith along with an estranged Jewish wife to marry my mother, she was not allowed to be part of the ceremony to lay him to rest. The whereabouts of his grave were never disclosed to her, and this must have deeply affected her own grieving process. Living in real, single-parent poverty, homeless and without support from family, my mother did a remarkable job of nurturing my sister and me during those first years, despite her own unimaginable grief. She passed on her deep thinking and intelligence, love of all things far out, and great empathy and compassion for others. Mother had exceptional literary and creative talents. Life was to throw an unfair amount of death and difficulties our way, which meant we grew up fast, and inescapably a little scarred by experience. It took a long time for me to shake off the mesh of the early life I had ultimately chosen, as I feel we as souls come into flesh to learn, and choose beforehand how we will do this, and I remained stuck in a cycle of disaster and pain. Finally, I pulled myself up in 2003, by following a strict diet of ascension processes, soberness and higher connection through meditation. I escaped thereafter for a while to the ends of the earth, following the steps of a one brother Jeremy, drawn there by the promise of peace and simple living, and the idealistic viewpoint I believed I had shared with him for so long. Jas Coleman, it seemed, had left a well-thought-out path to a true place of paradise, which assisted my journey to an island I have come to know and adore. My love of, and lifetime commitment to the rescue and rehabilitation of animals great and small, pulled me back to the grey harsh realities of North Manchester, only to find myself regretting for the 8 years following, that I did not remain as Crusoe. It is all too easy to make ties, and find reasons, as to why we can't live out our dreams and desires in the full. Those I had seen as extra special in my life had been dropping like chemically poisoned flies around me, so I lived a lot of years feeling hurt and abandoned, feelings which once I had completed the Ascension program had transformed into gifts of strength, wisdom and understanding, to help me in my métier. In autumn of 2009, circumstances led me to 2 physically and mentally burdening house moves in the space of 3 months. Just as we were settling into the first house, a dear friend, who was a true knight in shining armor, 1 in a million, died suddenly, from an adverse reaction to an antidepressant. Dragged down by the weight of maintenance payments larger than his wage, he had succumbed to the tragedy that is a lower-class societal disease. Harry lost himself in a barrage of prescription drugs, with the promise of a cure which became his demise. Another reminder that I must accept the choice I had made for myself, to lean on me, and only me, then at least I won't fall over when a soldier goes down, unless I lose a leg. A month after the second move, my beautiful aunt, to escape her ingrained fear of the past, hung herself in the bathroom of her rented suburban terraced home, plunging our family back into painful memories of my elders' childhoods, opening old wounds and almost destroying those closely affected. That saddening episode brought the suicide count in my close proximity to 4, and all were people I loved and looked up to as the best of the best. Within a month, another good friend lost his 19-year-old son to motor neuron disease, which had required 24-hour care from him in his single-parent position. 2 weeks prior to that, he had been informed of his own terminal cancer, with a maximum of 1 year left to live. Dave, just 49, was a great friend too, and fan of the band of musicians I had been writing and performing with, collectively known as I Am, since 2008, and the most gentle and caring man I had ever come across. During that time, 2 other souls who had played a starring role in my personal drama, providing comfort and assistance, also left the earth by horrific circumstance. I threw myself into work in a more conforming way than I ever had before, in a bid to accept the way things were and get on with it. After 18 months of soul-destroying grind, and very little play, giving way too much energy to self-sacrificing altruistic tendencies, I crashed headlong into a pit of illness. As an holistic hypnotherapist and teacher of ascension and natural healing, it was a massive case of hypocrisy. I had swallowed so much pain and hurt, wrongly thinking that I had mastered the art of detachment, in such a grand way, that the emotional effects of death and upheaval couldn't touch me anymore. I was off course and out of balance. Reconnected to Source, and back at the ends of the earth, inspiration streams from a perfectly azure sea, in which a huge pod of dolphins play seaweed noseball with their young. Oyster catchers shout incessantly about their breakfast each morning, whilst little blue herons practice invisibility. I could be in no better place to be given the words that I needed to share the adventure. When all that you can see is my former jester, won't you come up here with me? I'm waiting for a star. When all that you can see is my silly form, a jester, will you just come up here with me, and wait for Esther? Allow me to take you on her journey with this awesome band, bleating back from her rebellious former stance as a jester, that for some of us, putting your life in the hands of a rock and roll band, can be far from throwing it all away.